Hello, and welcome to the third installment of our overview of multi-tier system of supports. Just to review, MTSS is a framework designed to provide educational equity for all students that includes high-quality instructional and assessment elements that are implemented with fidelity and driven by data, and the data accurately represents the effectiveness of instruction as well as responsiveness of students or student outcomes. When developing a multi-tier system of support, so something that is supportive of both social competence and academic achievement, we really are looking at student outcomes. But in order to get those positive student outcomes, we need to look at these three areas of systems, practices, and data. So systems that support staff behavior, practices that support student behavior, and data that supports decision making. For the purpose of this lesson, we're going to focus on systems to support staff behavior, and we'll talk later about the data and the practices and how those affect student outcomes and work within a multi-tier system of support. When we begin to work with districts to implement a multi-tier system of support, we work with them to develop several products and or processes. For the purpose of today, as we focus on systems, we're really going to focus on these first few products or processes you see here. So the development of an administrative structure, organization or enhancement of meetings, the braiding of initiatives, and a responsive effective communication plan, and then the creation of a multi-year training schedule.
Okay, the presentation's tomorrow, so let's make sure we all know our usual responsibilities. Jeff, you keep feeding me old information. Dean, I need you to continue not living up to your resume. Sue, you're in charge of waffling.
Are you sure?
Jerome, you'll talk a big game, then do nothing.
Let's do it.
Rick, can you fold under pressure for me?
Like a lawn chair.
And Ted, you just keep thinking everyone's out to get you.
They are.
I'll be at FedEx Kinko's, where they'll help me design, print, copy, and finish the proposal.
Put your presentations together at FedEx Kinko's. Make it, print it, pack it, ship it. Our office is your office.
So a cute video may not be far from reality for some of us, or we've probably experienced that at some point in the past. But what we're hoping is that if we can develop these systems, that we can avoid working in an organization that functions like that. So the first thing that we do when working with our districts is really talk about developing the district's vision for MTSS. This is a sample vision. This was one written by Kent ISD's implementation team. We just restated the definition of what a MTSS framework was and talked about our vision across what content areas, what grade levels, how we wanted it integrated into programs, but really just talked about our vision for how we wanted to affect districts and then student outcomes within those districts. The next thing we do with districts is to work with them to develop a district management structure. This was one that was shared with us from the My Blissey project. You can see there's each little oval there is a different team within the organization or within the district. So you have your district executive leadership team. That's usually a group that's already in place. It's not something that's created. It's like a cabinet. The directors, whatever it might be called within that district, but that is they're the people who have the vision. They set the policy. They can bust through any barriers. They allocate the resources. Bubble below that is the administrative team, which most districts define as building principals. So they are again, they set some priority for their buildings. They allocate resources. They make sure that what's happening in their building aligns with what's happening in the district. And then over to the right, you have the district implementation team. That is a new team typically that districts will create because there's some overlap there from both the administrative team and the executive leadership team because we want to ensure that there's good two-way communication as indicated by those arrows on there. But we want to make sure that there are people with kind of their foots in both doors or in both worlds on the district implementation team as well as the cabinet, as well as the administrative team, because those people will really be developing the plan for the district, but they'll also be working to develop these products and these processes that we're about to go through. And it's important that there is input from the upper levels of administration at the district. There's also this idea of a MTSS coordinator that then from the district implementation team really helps support buildings with training and coaching and developing materials, all those things that you can see there in the yellow box. And as confusing as that may look like, districts have developed their own ways of displaying this graphically. So this is one example from Caledonia. This is their management structure. So they really took the ideas that were shared with them and they flipped it. So they have these students and these teachers up on top, because every other team throughout the district is there to support students and teachers. So there's building level teams, which we'll look at a little bit deeper on the next slide. There's the idea of the implementation supports that the implementation team develops and puts in place with input from the administrative team and this district MTSS coordinator who functions between the implementation team and the administrative team. Then there's that implementation team who, with a liaison, which they have titled their person who functions as a member of cabinet as well as the implementation team. So talking a little bit more about those building teams, this was an example again from Caledonia where they took their MTSS building team and combined it with their school improvement team, or made it the same as their school improvement team. So they selected grade level representation, but then they also were very clear that they had people who were working on MTSS across the different content areas, so whether it be for behavior or PBIS, ELA or math, they have them all represented on the school improvement team as well, or the MTSS team. So they really make it very clear how this communication is going to occur, that there's overlap between the membership of the school improvement team and all of these work teams, and that they've also combined it with their school improvement team to make it really seamless how MTSS is integrated within their building. So with all these teams, we work to ensure that there are good organizational structures and really effective team meetings. And to do that, we recommend these 5 roles within any given team meeting. You should probably are at least very familiar with most of these roles. The one thing that might be different is this idea of an action plan recorder versus a note taker. So the note taker just really keeps minutes, master notes, but the action plan recorder keeps very specific action plan items for the day. This is an example of an action plan that teams will use. You can see it's got who is responsible, what action needs to be taken, or what communication needs to be had. Do we need any additional resources to do this? When does it need to be done by? And then we found it helpful to connect every action to our improvement plan. So what goal, strategy, or activity does it relate to on an improvement plan? This isn't mandated to districts that work with us, but it's just one example of an action plan. People take pieces, tweak it to meet their own needs, but really the important piece is to have an action plan that is workable and actionable after every team meeting. So another activity that we bring districts through is what we call the braiding of initiatives, or the weaving of initiatives. When districts begin to work with us, they sit down and they list all of the committees or initiatives that are occurring within their district at that given time. After they've listed them all, they prioritize them. They look at who's on those teams. They look for overlap. Are there any very similar teams that have similar goals and priorities, or are there any teams that have very similar memberships? So they look to see, are there teams that we can combine? Are there teams that we can eliminate? How can we better serve our students in our buildings through reorganizing these teams without losing things that are priorities. This is a visual representation of the braiding of initiatives for an example district. So for example, teacher evaluation was a high priority, school improvement, MTSS, and then PLCs. And so how can we weave all these together to promote successful student outcomes? This is an activity that as we finish up the video, at the end of the video, you will be prompted to look at this district committee audit and look at some of the roles or the committees or the work groups that you're involved with in your organization, and begin to look at how do they all function together and how can we integrate them to make one successful vision or one successful way to impact student outcomes. So another thing, after we've identified all these different teams and all these different work groups and all these different levels, we need to make sure we have a really effective communication plan. This is, again, Kent ISD's examples. And so what we did first was we identified all the stakeholder groups that we had within our organization. So you can see we've got cabinet on there. You can see the instructional services department on there. We also identified our local districts. We identified the board. We identified our consultants within the ISD. And how would we communicate to each one of those groups? Who will share the information? When and how is it shared? What structures are already in place that we can easily just share information at? What kind of plans do we need to develop to get our message or our communication, what we're working on, out to everybody? This is something that is really, I think, difficult to implement, but something that is so important to the success of a system. And so not just, you'll see on the far right there, it's not just what are we communicating out, how are we getting communication back as well. So really trying to focus on two-way communication versus just one-way communication where we're just telling everybody what we're doing and not receiving any feedback. So that was an important piece of our first year of implementation and some things that we work on with our districts to kind of recreate and get a really effective communication plan. And finally, districts develop a training schedule. So they look at their buildings and really intentionally decide who's ready, who and what level they're ready at. So who's ready to work on behavior supports? Who's ready to work on reading supports? Are we going to take a district-wide approach and have everybody start with behavior? These are all things that are individualized to the districts, but we need to work with them and collaborate with them in organizing this so that everybody has access and we all have the capacity to deliver the training content that they need to access. So you can see this is the last 2 years of our project and the buildings that we started with last year and the buildings that were added this year, or the different training strands that were added this year in the blue. So it looks very different for every district, and that's okay, and that's good because every district is different and they all choose to implement this a little bit different. The important thing is that it's systematized and that we continue to look at data to decide who's ready and where we move next. And so finally, hopefully, through taking all of these steps to develop these effective systems, we can become as efficient as these guys.
Converters we have in stock. We don't know where our trucks are, and no one knows where Mackler is.
6,000 converters. Trucks are at I-4, exit 9. Mackler, where are you?
In the airport.
So take a look at the activity below, and we will talk soon.